I've got a problem. I need a way to regrind the bevels on my chisels and plane irons and tune up my lathe tools, but I don't have any space for a dedicated sharpening station. But I do have a belt sander. So in this video, I made this bizarre contraption to help me regrind my bevels and sharpen the lathe tools. Look at that. That's an ember burning on the plastic, and boy can I smell it. And you can even see the smoke coming up. To get a 25-degree grind on a plane iron like this by registering it on the table flat like this, I would need to be able to tilt this table to 65 degrees. Let's see how far it'll go. .47. So doing something like this won't work. Here's a close-up of that shot. If I present the bevel of the plane iron to the belt sander, you can see the visible gap here. The bevel's not actually touching. And that's because the angle just doesn't match. There are a number of ways I could try to address this issue, but I saw an interesting reader post in one of the woodworking magazines in which he suggested using a standard bar drawer handle pull as a way to register the steel to the belt sander. And that sort of reminds me of the round bar approach that the Tormex sharpener and many of its clones employ for sharpening. So I'm going to try to find a way to mount this handle somewhere in this vicinity. Maybe I'll first mount it to this piece of white oak and then somehow find a way to mount the white oak to these holes that are already existing for the table. So then it occurred to me that I already have two round bars here on this extension fence for my bandsaw. Let's see if the holes match up. Yeah, that's a perfect fit. And there's already a hole drilled into the end of the bar with threads to accept this screw here. And I don't mind sacrificing this piece here. It's an add-on to the bandsaw that's supposed to provide out support. But to be honest, I don't think I've ever used it. So this idea is coming together. Let me assemble something and show you what I come up with. Okay, here's what I've come up with so far. You can see the bars are really long. Hopefully that doesn't bother me too much. And it's looking like this will give me the flexibility to do the sharpening. But I found this 2-in-1 sharpening guide on sale at Highland Woodworker. And I think the idea is that you put the plane iron or chisel mounted here on the top. You separate the two halves, use the top half on the grinder, attach the bottom half again, and then it becomes a honing guide for your sharpening stone. It was a really nice price, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try. Maybe it actually works. So let's get this set up. So that's looking close, and then to make sure it's square, there's hash marks on the front and back. So I suppose the idea is that if this side is on the same hash mark on the front as it is in back, then that means the blade is perpendicular to the jig. So now when I use this honing guide on my stones, I'll be honing at 25 degrees. So the next step is to remove these two screws and then set up this bar so that this jig also presents this edge to the sandpaper at 25 degrees. So with the screws removed, I can take this part off. And this sort of tenon here is supposed to fit in the slot of a grinding jig, but my concept is to have it ride on this bar. Wow, it looks like I'm already pretty close. I do need to move the bar in a little bit. Okay, that's perfect. And I'll verify that I'm still parallel. Looks good. Okay, that was a good first test. I got a wonderful grind here. The problem is it's not at a right angle to the side. I did double check to make sure that I'm at a right angle to the jig, and I am. But then I double checked the distance between the bar and the sandpaper, and this side over here was out a little this way. So I nudged it back, and I'm going to start the grind over again. There we go. That's perfect. So that looks like a really nice grind. I checked it for square. It looks great. I got a nice burr all the way across. I've gone ahead and reinstalled the base with the wheel, and I'm going to start with my 600 grit diamond stone. It doesn't look like there'll be a need to go down to the 300, but we'll see. I'm actually finding this fairly comfortable to grip by these screws and then put my fingers here. Okay, I got to jump in here really quick. The 2-in-1 honing guide is working great as a grinding guide, but not so great as a honing guide. So I'm taking this part off and only using this part for the grinding. For the honing, I'll be switching over here to the Veritas honing guide. There's a big long explanation for all this, but I won't go into it in this video. This is the 1000 grit stone. A few more strokes here, and then I'm going to take it over to the strop. So far I've gotten a good grind on the bevel using the belt sander. I refined that grind using my coarse diamond stone, then honed away the grinding marks using my finer diamond stones. Now I'm going to refine that, give it a little bit of polish, and make sure the burr is removed using my strop. And this is where I really like having the single bevel, because it's not really practical to use a honing guide, at least I don't like using a honing guide on a leather strop. That means I got to find the bevel by hand, and I know some people are successful at finding micro bevels on a strop or a stone by hand. I am not. What I end up with is not a single micro bevel, but like 20 micro bevels, which you know, by definition is more of a rounded nose than a sharp edge. It's not that I don't believe in micro bevels, it's just I have a hard time getting them to work for me. Once I find the bevel, I can lock my arms in and then just rock back and forth with my legs. And now I'll remove the edge. Notice I'm picking up the blade, pulling back, picking up the blade, pulling back. So that edge should be in good shape. Okay, I'm going to call that a success. I can successfully grind on my belt sander a plain iron and then take it all the way through the honing and polishing process. I should mention this is a 2 3/8 inch wide plain iron. It would fit common Stanley sizes 4.5, 5.5, 6, and 7. I think the number 8 is the only one a little wider than this. So if my belt sanding grinding system can handle this blade, it'll pretty much handle anything I have in my shop. But I need to grind other things as well, such as bevels on chisels. This is my quote-unquote good set of chisels. The serious hand tool guys will laugh, but these have worked really nice for me. I keep these in good shape, so they don't need any regrinding right now. But what I call my dirty work chisels are in horrible shape. I use these chisels for household remodeling or other tasks that I think might put my good chisels at risk. As you can see, these need quite a bit of help. And that would just be too much metal to remove by hand on a stone. It could be done, but I don't have that kind of time. So I need to use a power tool to grind past this damage. I'm starting to like this upper portion of the honing guide more and more. Actually, the bottom section doesn't even work very well. It doesn't set level on the stone. You have to put a lot of hand pressure down in order to keep full contact on the bevel. So it's not a very good honing guide. But look at how it's been able to accommodate this chisel. This is a very wedge-shaped chisel, and the upper bar here just tilted to accommodate that shape perfectly. You can see how it's wider here and more narrow here. One problem with this chisel, though, is because the blade and handle are so short, I'm really bottomed out here in terms of how much exposed blade I can have past the front. That means I've had to move my bar inward towards the belt in order to accommodate that angle. And if I put this surface here under the bar, it's not the right angle. But I found that if I put it on top of the bar, like so, it is the right angle. So I found that what I need to do is tighten one side, then I capture that depth there, and then I just need to make sure I'm matching that depth on this side. It needs to go in a little bit. So now I can tighten that side down as well. So I've selected my most nasty case here to put it to the test. So let's see how it does. I forgot to mention, I made sure I'm perfectly square in this jig. You can see from the grinding pattern here how uneven that bevel was. Also, I'm going to keep the shop vac off. The other steel I was grinding was not making very many sparks. This stuff is sparking like crazy. So to mitigate the risk of a fire, I'm going to shut the vacuum off so I'm not pulling in hot embers into the shop vac. Okay, back to work. So now I have a really nice accurate grind, but look at the serration on that edge. I've got quite a bit of metal to remove yet. Look at that. That's an ember burning on the plastic, and boy can I smell it. And you can even see the smoke coming up. So that's why I turned the shop vac off. Earlier I showed you the ember that was burning down here on the grill on this dust collection fixture for my belt sander. It actually wasn't the plastic of the belt sander burning, it was all this material. And what this material is the rubber from my crepe belt cleaner. So I'm going to clean that out now before I do any more grinding. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll reinstall it now. Okay, so here's that nasty chisel. I got a nice accurate grind from the belt sander. I refined the grind on my diamond stones, and then I honed away the grinding marks on my honing diamond stones. Then I took it to the strop and polished it up a little bit. I also did more work on the back because I had removed so much metal. I was into sort of a hollow here and had to work on the back a little bit. That being said, that's a perfectly good edge. I'm going to go ahead and give it the red oak end grain test. Okay, not bad. Okay, so there we have it. I got a pretty nice grind on all 5 of these chisels. Very consistent. Easy to put on the stone and tune up the grind, hone away the grind marks, and then take to the strop and polish up a bit. Of course, normally I wouldn't spend that much time on these construction grade chisels, but I like to vet a new process on cheap tools rather than my good tools. This belt sander is a fantastic woodworking tool. It was never really set up for precise machining. So there's a couple things I keep in mind when using to grind the bevel on a plane iron or help flatten the back of a plane iron or the sole of a bench plane. The first thing I watch out for is the belt seam. Because there's a piece of tape holding the belt together, it can be thicker there. And if it's too thick, you can get a pretty serious bump here, which means this part is much more aggressive than the rest of the belt. So any defect in the grit here will be adding a defect to your metal piece. Another thing is with both wood and metal, there's a tendency to work the center more than the edges. So what can happen is the grit in the center strip of the belt can become worn faster than the outsides of the belt. And the effect we get there is the outsides will cut faster. So if I sand only here, I'm going to be sanding this side of the blade more than this side of the blade, and it will either skew it or create some sort of an arc. So not only do I need to be worried about the quality of the belt side to side, I also need to be sure that the belt is laying flat on the platen behind here. On this Shopsmith belt sander, this system auto tensions, and in fact if I turn it all the way there, that allows me to remove the belt. To retension the belt, I just push that button in and gently let go. Now if the belt's loose any and I'm laying a plane blade flat like this or grinding or anything, what can happen is the belt won't be totally flat against the platen, and then as I push it down, it'll dive under the metal and then back up again, which will create an arc this way on whatever I'm grinding. I can help that out a little bit by just giving the auto tensioning system a little bit of help. Just like a little 1/16 of a turn usually tightens that up. It's still not perfect, but a lot better. Something else I watch out for is how flat is the platen. My platen is pretty flat top to bottom, but it is slightly concave left to right. So there again, I got to be careful about my process. Usually I'm going to use the belt sander to rough grind to remove lots of metal with the thought that I'll be refining that shape with something flatter later on. Here's a shot looking down from the top down the length of the platen. I think you can see that side to side arc. Notice how I'm able to wiggle that ruler in the middle. That's because it's riding high on the edges with clearance down the middle. Actually not too bad here at the bottom, more pronounced at the top. So those are just some things I keep in mind so that I don't get wacky shapes on what I'm grinding. So far the belt sanding grinder attachment has worked really well with the plane iron and the chisels. But I've got another type of tool I need to sharpen, and that is lathe chisels. I'm not an experienced wood turner, but I'd like to become one someday, so that means I need to know how to sharpen chisels. For all my Shopsmith viewers out there, I do have the Shopsmith grinding jig, but it just didn't work for me. I found it awkward to use, and I just wasn't getting very good results. Also, the Shopsmith jig won't work on the geometries for other lathe chisels like these Craftsman chisels, for example. I'm going to start with the skew chisel because I think there's a chance I could use this honing guide that's been working so well so far. Now I've changed out the belt sander belt. I took off the 100 grit belt and put on a 240 grit belt. And that's because I'm not going to be touching up these chisels after they leave the belt sander. Okay, to get this to work, I think there might be some trial and error experimentation. To get started, I've placed a square here and then scored a few lines with a pencil. Then by eyeball, I set the blade exposure and the distance between the bar and the belt so that it's riding on the full bevel. Now I want to make sure that the pointed edge here is in parallel with one of my lines. Now I'm going to rub it back and forth like this. See where the scratch marks end up. Okay, so I've got scratch marks all the way from the heel of the bevel to the tip, so that means I must be pretty close. So I'm setting up to do the gouge, and this is one that I really messed up on the Shopsmith sharpening jig. I just didn't use proper technique, so I got a very uneven bevel. You can see how that uneven bevel translates into kind of a wonky edge there. So I'm hoping to correct it with this system. What I've done is taken this 1.25 inch collar that I got off of Amazon. I'll leave the link in the description. I removed the set screw and replaced it with this bolt. Put a piece of drawer liner material here so that it would grip, and it's nice and tight. I was worried that there wouldn't be enough room between the white oak bar here and the drawer pull to accommodate the chisel collar, but it looks like there's plenty. By the way, I got the idea for adding a collar to the chisel from Dave of Sassafras Valley. Dave runs a YouTube channel which sometimes covers Shopsmith equipment. I'll link to the video where he shows this idea. He made his out of wood, but I'm going to use what I already have around. This seems to be working pretty well. Certainly not going to claim that that's perfect, but I think it's in better shape than what it was, and it looks like it has a usable edge there. This was not a no-brainer technique. Downward force of the belt wanted to push my collar off, so I had to make a concerted effort here. Now that I say that to the camera, maybe I should have put my collar on top of the bar and sharpened that way. You know what? I'm going to go look at a couple videos and see if I can't learn something. I'll be back. So the answer is no, I don't want to put the collar on the inside. Grizzly sells a collar that's purpose made for this. It looks kind of like this, it's a similar concept, but it's for their whetstone sharpening system. And they show the collar being held on the outside of the bar. So what I found out is that it's just a matter of planting my feet, getting firmly up against that bar, and using both hands, rotate all the way around. Sort of think the best thing to do is start at one end, do a full rotation all the way around, lift it off. Well, obviously I have a little skill to build when it comes to sharpening those lathe chisels. But that will come with time, and the system is showing promise to allow me to do that. It also did a great job regrinding the bevels on my chisels and plane iron. And all I have invested in this is some spare parts from my bandsaw that I'm not using, a hunk of white oak, and a $7 drawer pull from the Nards. Okay, I just did something that really drives me nuts when YouTubers do this. I oversimplified this. I said all I had in it was some spare parts from the bandsaw, a hunk of white oak, and a $7 drawer pull. Truth is that these bars come as a kit, and that does cost some money. I also have some screws and washers that I had laying around, in addition to this bolt and this collar that I already had, which were not free, and this honing guide. But still, I think this is a relatively low-cost, simple solution that solves a problem for me, as opposed to buying an entire dedicated sharpening system like a Tormek, which I don't have any room to store or use that tool anyway. Okay, that does it for this woodshop nerdery video. I hope to see you in the next one.